What's going on, everybody? It is Juan from Raven Drone Solutions here with another video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about a lot of these companies that like to overhype how much you can make. I'm talking about the drone industry, obviously. There's a lot of these drone jobbing websites, which I've already talked about. I've talked about contracting and everything several times already. But I think you as a pilot and as a business owner, you need to really pay very close attention to how much you're being paid. Unfortunately, and this is just a common trend, there's a lot of these drone jobbing companies that really don't pay much, or they overinflate how much you can realistically make. So a lot of times they'll be like, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, assets or flights or whatever the case might be. Like for example, right now I'm doing cell towers. So I'm like, well, if you do 3 or 4 towers in one day, you can make over $1,000, and that all sounds fantastic, except for the fact that they don't account for the amount of time it takes at each one, the driving distance. Obviously, if you want to take a break to eat or whatever. So you as a pilot need to factor in a lot of costs. And you need to be very careful with some of these companies, because I flat out rejected some of them. I said, look, I'm sorry, but with what you require and what you're paying me, I mean, there's a big disconnect there. Now there's other companies that and actually one that I might work with if I get selected, but there's several companies that the pay may not be the best. Like you might be making anywhere from $200 to $300 a day, but you don't have to pay for any of your own equipment, insurance, or any of that stuff. Like, it's all provided for. The only thing you're doing is you're just being a contractor for the time being, and that's fine when you factor in all the costs and you see, like, well, I mean, yeah, the pay may not be the best, but the fact that you're not using any of your own equipment and you're flying under somebody else's company, I mean, it's not that bad. But if you're obviously if you have to put forth all the money in terms of your drone, your equipment, insurance, software, training, certifications, you name it, then you need to be very careful who you fly for, who you contract with, because a lot of times it's not profitable. Actually, the company UAV Visuals, which I'll link down below, they actually have a drop profitability calculator. Now these guys are out of Australia, so if you stumble upon them, or if you look at the PDF, you're gonna have to tweak quite a few things depending on what country you're in and depending on what the laws are where you're at. But it actually outlines a very good it basically outlines a very good way for you to know how much money you're actually making on the project, because sometimes they'll throw a figure. They'll be like, oh, you're making $100 an hour, but you're only spending an hour, if that, on a certain site, and you still got to drive from one place to the other. I mean, you got to ask, okay, well, depending on what I'm doing, is it worth it? I used to do a lot of real estate shoots, and I saw very quickly, I'm like, this company that I was working with, they didn't really pay much, and honestly, I was pretty much losing money working with them. And I talked to them about it, and they basically said, "Look, I'm sorry, but we're not paying you anymore. We might increase your rate at $5 every year." I'm like, okay, no, that's not worth it for me. And basically, it's just I was making $45, if that, for every house that I did, and that was and this is also interior photography, so I mean, very quickly I saw it wasn't worth it. But this is what I mean. Now, granted, I was just getting started, so I mean, sometimes you just got to take on the low-paying jobs to get experience or whatever, and that's fine. I'm not saying don't do it. I've said it before. Look, sometimes it's worth doing it, because you need flight hours, you need experience, you need to be able to sell yourself, and if you don't have the skills, then you can't do it. But with that being said, you also need to keep track of your time. You need to keep track of how much you're spending, because I'll be honest with you, especially if you really want to make money, this isn't cheap. It's not a cheap thing to do. I mean, I've spent quite a bunch already on everything from drones, software, equipment, you name it, and it's not a cheap thing. It's not a cheap kind of business to have. And you really got to factor this in. And a lot of times when you're doing jobs and you're getting paid like just the bare minimum, I mean, you're hardly covering your costs. So you got to do your due diligence. You got to learn when to say no. You have to learn when to put your foot down. You got to learn how to negotiate sometimes, and sometimes they're not going to take it, and that's fine. But you gotta know what's worth your time. I mean, I work for several companies already that, quite frankly, they weren't very good. I mean, even a company like B360, I mean, which, I'll be honest, this is a horrible company to work with. I know some people might disagree, but I mean, they actually put out several job offers for people, and I mean, the pay was so miserably low that they literally had to ask potential not clients, potential pilots that are going to fly for them that, look, please do not be insulted by how much we're paying, blah, blah, blah. All you're doing is X, Y, and Z. And I mean, look, if you got to say that don't be insulted, then clearly what you're paying is crap. And it is quite insulting. I mean, some of the stuff that they were paying me, it was a flat out insult. I was like, look, guys, I'm not working with you again. If you guys are not going to pay, like, if you guys are not going to pay me what I'm worth and make it worth my time, then I'm not working with you guys. And they said, all right, fine, well, then see ya. I mean, it is what it is, but yeah, just be very careful with a lot of these companies. There was another company that I did, actually the company I originally started training with and all these other things. I'm not going to call them out because I have a non-disclosure agreement, but basically this company overpromised, and it's been over a year and they still haven't delivered on what they said. I had to do pretty much everything on my own. They basically said they were going to find you clients, and you could be making six figures within the first year, and like an idiot I fell for it, along with many other people. But look, it is what it is. I mean, I learned from that. I mean, it's just, I'm not trying to sue them or anything because it'd be a waste of my time, but yeah, I mean, look, I just had to go and pull my pants up and just get it done and start to find clients and everything, and I've been doing okay. But that was a very harsh lesson, that be very careful with what you listen to, be very careful who you trust, be very careful what companies say, because sometimes in these companies they just want to get people on their platform, they want to get people to fly for them, but really what they're offering is very, very minimal. And this is what I mean, is like, you really got to factor in your costs. Like, you can't think just like an employee, you got to think like a business owner. And it's not just, oh, well, if I'm doing all these missions, that's about $20 an hour, $30 an hour, like, as a salary. I mean, that's not really the way you got to think about it. I mean, that's not really the way you should think about it. You should think long term. Like, you should think broad. I mean, I got a lot of costs I gotta factor in. And if all I'm making is a small amount, well, generally speaking, this is not worth my time. So, like I said, you got to be very careful, be mindful, ask as many questions. I mean, I've flown with several companies, and yeah, it's just, unfortunately, many of them, they overinflate how much you can make. A lot of them, they're just third-party companies that will get you jobs, but really what you're doing is just capturing the data, so you're really making almost nothing. And yeah, these are just the harsh realities that a lot of pilots face, especially a lot of new pilots, especially if you're like me and you don't really have the connections, you don't really have the clientele yet to be saying, like, okay, like, I can do what I want, and I got steady income. It's a grind for a lot of pilots. A lot of pilots think that it's going to be quick money, and unfortunately it isn't. But yeah, these are things you got to keep in mind. Comment down below, subscribe, let me know what you think. If there's anything else you want me to talk about, chime in if there's anything that you might have had experience with. Chime in if there's any good companies that you might have worked with. I'd really love to hear about this. I've worked with a few good ones, so definitely they're out there. Anyways, guys, that is it for today. Let me know what you think. Anyway, see you next time.